Brother Dhoruba was a Black Panther, Black Liberation Army, also a political prisoner for 19 years, right? If you just marinate on 19 years. Some of y'all ain't even 19 yet, right? And so it's important for us to be able to have access to people like this. When we talk about Africana Studies is not just about learning about our African past. It's about how do we look at the past in order to create a better future for ourselves. And that includes Black fighting formations, right? That includes radical politics. That includes fighting the injustice of police terrorism, right? And that's why this is a perfect speaker for us to come in and have today. Also with him is Brother Kalanji, who's also instrumental in movements around police terrorism and helping Black people overall. So let's give them a very, very warm welcome.
First of all, I want to say, I'm going to sit down now and relax. The first thing I want to say is that it's an extreme pleasure for me to talk to young people who are trying to make their way through a system that's teaching you what to think rather than how to think. And it's very important for us to understand our history, and our history in living terms, not in abstract terms, in terms of looking at old pictures of people and saying, wow, they did this and they did that, or that king was a great man because he did this and he did that. The purpose of this, and one of the reasons why I'm glad to be here, is for you to understand that everything that was done in the past by people you consider of great stature, of great importance, began with people who were just like you, who were no different than you, who came from the same place you come from. And that's very, very important to understand. That's very important to understand that history is a living thing. As Malcolm X once pointed out, that history is the best subject to reward all research. And it is. But not dry history, living history. And you know, in the last session with the class, some of you were here that were there, I think. How many of you were in the last session that I just spoke to? Huh? Okay, one or two. And the sisters could tell you, the first question I asked, and I'll ask you this question: when did World War II end? Does anybody know?
45. 45?
You're not from here. No. When did World War II end? There it is. Everything that's happened since 1945, up until this present moment, has determined your reality today. The militarization of the police murder in our community, the fact that we have to revisit the Voting Rights Act every 10 years in order to reassert our right to vote and our citizenship. All of these things, the school to prison pipeline, where our children are sent from public school to public prisons, the miseducation of an entire generation. The U.S. has been engaged in numerous wars, almost a dozen wars since 1945. And these wars have determined the psychic and the mentality of white America. Today, the United States is a superpower. In any other era, it would be called an empire. And the reason why it isn't called an empire today is because of the mass media that twists your brains and your understanding of reality. I want to ask a question. How many of you here have a Twitter account? How many of you here are on Twitter? Don't be shy. Don't be Twitter. How many of you here have a Twitter account? How many of you here have a Facebook account? How many of you here are on Instagram? Here you go. And Viber. All of these social medias are designed to do what? To connect you to each other, right? That's what you think they are, right? You know, there was a time when you had to be all you could be on your own. Where people had to respect you based on a face-to-face relationship that they had with you. You didn't have anonymous friends. The word friend meant somebody you actually knew. face to face. You actually knew their name. You actually knew who they were, maybe even their parents and how they grew up. You shared the history with the people that were your friends. Now you have friends on Facebook, you haven't got a clue who they are. Some of them could be Popo. You don't know. You don't know who you're talking with, who you're dealing with. And the reason why I said this is because you're a new generation that has a whole different understanding of personal space. You have a whole different understanding of what is privacy. When I was growing up, privacy meant a whole different thing. To you today, you think nothing of the fact that the government spies on you every day. You think it's no big thing because I'm not doing anything. You think it's no big thing that the U.S. government invented the Google, and that you use Google every day in your research. You think nothing of the fact that Facebook is used for counterintelligence purposes, just like letters to divide people were used by the FBI under COINTELPRO. All of these techniques to disrupt and to misdirect and to stop people from empowering themselves have been amplified by technology and by you and by a generation, the so-called millennial generation, that has no understanding or no connection to what has happened in the last generation. This is not your fault. No one's blaming you for this. But unfortunately, in this day and age, with all these Twitter accounts and all these Facebook accounts and all this information that you have, in this day and age, ignorance is no longer bliss. What you don't know will get you killed. When I was growing up, what you don't know didn't hurt you. If you didn't know, hey, it didn't bother me. But now you are so much inundated with information. You have so much information at your disposal, you don't know what to believe. To the point where information is no longer intelligence for you. Information is an excuse for you not to do anything. Because you know, in the old days and today, you are responsible for what you know. If you were to walk out this door tomorrow and commit a crime, you say, well, I didn't know that was against the law. It'll tell you, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Ignorance of the law is not a defense in a court of law. Did you know that? If you didn't know a law existed and you violated it and the cops arrested you, your ignorance of that law is no excuse. It's no defense. So in a system in which ignorance can get you prosecuted, how come it is that intelligence cannot liberate you, cannot free you, cannot empower you? And the reason why is because you do not understand how you got to where you're at now and what you need to do to move forward. You will have children, and your children's children will have children, inshallah. What will you tell your children when they inherit a world in which the mere thought of rebellion is a crime? What would you tell your children when the police state controls every facet of their life and they don't know what the word freedom means? What are you going to tell them? What are you going to tell them you did? Your generation is a unique generation. There'll never be another generation like you. And so therefore you hold your own destiny in your hands. You hold the destiny of your own people and your future in your hands. So ignorance cannot be bliss for you. What you don't know, you will have to find out. And how do we find these things out? The last time we talked in the other classroom, I told each person to examine your family. How did your family wind up in Oakland, California? Do you know how you all got here? Do you know when your people got here? Why they came here? Where did they come from? And why did they leave there? How did you get here? How did you get here? Dad, moms decided to pack up and move to California? You're probably the only generation that was born here. Most people, when I was growing up, nobody was born in California. Everybody came from someplace else. Now you have an entire generations and generations who were born here in California. But how did you get here? How did black folks get to California? In the gold rush? How did we get here? Did we come on a wagon train? How How did we get here? Did we build a railroad and, jump on a train? How did we get here? This is a fundamental question. Because it's the answer to that question that tells you why the police do what they do to you in this community here. It's to show you why you don't have political power in this area here. To show you how the educational systems were skewed against you. And why you had the longest strike in school history, in academic history in San Francisco State back in the 60s. The students struck so that you would have these types of programs. How did you get here? How did you come over? How did you get here? So we started with 1945, and I started with that because I was born in 44. So I was like a baby. Then, I was once a baby. I didn't come out of egg, and I didn't, I wasn't popped out of the 10-point program. I was a baby at one time. And you got here because your parents came here. And the majority of black folks in the Oakland area came here as a result of World War II. As a result of the naval base here in this area, to work at the naval base during the war. That's how the majority of the black population was accumulated in Riverside, in Oakland, and in the Bay Area. You came to work for the U.S. Navy, for the U.S. War Department, to advance the war effort in World War II. So when World War II ended in 1945, many of your grandmothers and great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers had migrated to the Oakland area, to the Bay Area, looking for work. And they migrated into certain areas that became ghettos in West and East Oakland. And these ghettos were policed by cops, white cops, who came from the same place your parents came from. They came from the same place your parents came from, Louisiana and Texarkana and the South. And these were rednecks, straight up rednecks. These were crackers. Their family were members of the Ku Klux Klan. Their family were old good boys who fought in the Civil War to make sure that your ass stayed a slave. These were the children that police does. These were the children that Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale decided to take a law book to the streets and guns and 2 police in patrol. The Oakland PD. One of the most racist police departments in the United States. One of the most brutal police departments in the United States. So you had to step out of history. In this place, at that time, one person and 2 who decided to make a difference and step out in their community with a law book and a gun. Law book and a gun. One is totally useless without the other. If you don't believe me, why are the police in our community? They tell you, to enforce the law. And what do they enforce the law with? A gun. What do they intimidate you with? Guns. What do they threaten you with? Guns. So when they stop and frisk a little black kid, or they stop and frisk a young black man who has no criminal record, and arrest him for half of a joint, and run him through the system, he can no longer own a gun. He can't get a legal license to own a gun. You thought stop and frisk was just harassment. Stop and frisk had a deeper political implication, especially here in places like Oakland and New York. It was designed to make sure that young black people do not acquire the right or the ability to legally defend themselves against police and racist attack. And if you think that Ferguson is about police brutality, you need to think again. Ferguson is about the right to black self-defense. That's what it's about. All of these arguments in the streets about cops and policing, and they need body cameras, and they need all of this stuff, and they need more training, and they need more sensitivity, and you have all these bootlickers coming out to apologize for the police and say they're humans just like us, and they're unconscious racists, and they're trying to do a good job, yada, 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 yada. Bottom line is, if your ass don't have a gun, you can't defend yourself against a knucklehead like that. A knucklehead who today could take a civil service exam, and tomorrow get trained, get a gun on his hip, and kill you. And you don't know who he is. You don't know whether he's crazy, insane. You don't know whether this person is a schizophrenic. You don't know he's a drug addict. You don't know if he hates women. You don't know this guy at all. But he has the power of life and death over you. This is where you're at. You're in an institution of higher learning that's supposed to develop you to be productive members of society. But education is not just to train you into your ABCs and science and all of these curriculums that you go through every day that you have to pass. Education is designed to train you into the values and the standards of the most powerful people in that society that you live in. You are being trained into the value system and the political system of a society that no longer empowers people, in which people no longer have the right or the ability to gather in their own numbers and change things, that your vote doesn't count. You are in a society now in which the rich control the democratic and political system, in which an oligarchy determines the policies of this country, and your vote don't matter. It's a question of mind over matter. White folks don't matter, and niggas don't matter. And you don't matter. Your vote doesn't matter at this particular point. What matters today, what matters to this generation, is your numbers. Your numbers in the street. In the street. Not in this classroom, in the street. Stay in the street every day, and the dialogue in this country will change. Stay in the street every day and demand justice and demand your humanity be recognized, and they will change. Leave the streets, come into these institutions, get pacified by programs, and nothing will change. You'll get progressively worse. And we see that. We see what happened when the civil rights activists, the John Lewises, and all these civil rights icons that you value and that you read about. We see what happens when they abandon the program of someone like Dr. King, who fought for the poor, who fought for the working class, who fought for the disenfranchised, who in fact launched the Poor People's March the very year he was murdered. He was about empowering the poor. But those Negroes who were in the SCLC, those Negroes who were in the Urban League, those Negroes who were in the NAACP, after Brown versus Ferguson, after 1954, they had no more of an interest in empowering poor people. They had an interest now to climb the economic and institutional ladder and become the mayors, and become the leaders in our community, and become the members on the corporate boards. And that's what they did. And they abandoned poor people. This was when King was alive and died. They abandoned that whole movement for the poor. And what was the consequence of that? The consequence of that, the consequence of us getting universal rights to vote, universal suffrage, the consequence of that was mass incarceration. Voter registration stopped at the prison wall. The United States went on a prison boom and started building prisons all across the country. Created prisons into $1 billion a year industry. At the same time they created these prisons, they created a public school system that ensured that the majority of our children would matriculate from public school to prison. It became the prison industrial complex. It became the new Jim Crow that Michelle Alexander wrote about. This was the pushback against the right to vote for African people. The pushback against our right to vote was prison. And now we have today amongst us, in our society, almost 6% of the electorate in the black community cannot vote because they have a felony conviction. 6% of the votes. That's a lot of people in our community. And we're not talking about their families now. The families of people that went to jail. When we talk about 2.5 million people in lock and key in America, we're talking about 2.5 million people under lock and key at this moment. That means that millions of people have already went through the system up until this moment and came out the other end. And where are they now? They're in our communities with criminal convictions, on parole, on probation, unemployed because they can't get a job because they have a criminal conviction. So we have an entire constituency in our community who has been totally marginalized by a system of criminalization of people of color, criminalization of immigrants, criminalizations of the homeless, criminalization of poor people, while at the same time the major vendors, the major suppliers, the major providers of income and money to politicians comes from the corporate elite. 0.5%. Control the political direction of this country. And you cannot match them in wealth. You cannot match them in influence. The only thing that you can outmatch them in is numbers. The streets. The street is the ultimate arbitrator of democracy in this country. If you don't believe me, ask George Washington's ghost. How did G-Dub become the president, first president of the United States? He was first an outlaw and a criminal. He was declared one of the most wanted, like Osama bin Laden, to the British Empire. He was the British Empire's American version of Osama bin Laden. He was a terrorist. He killed British soldiers. He usurped the British crown. He tried to overthrow the King of England. He tried to succeed from empire. This was George Washington and his cronies and his crew. You know, Ben Franklin and the guys on the $100 bills and all those guys. They were criminals. They were criminals. But they realized that what they were involved in was either they would be free or they would die. They chose to fight for freedom, their freedom. And you gotta remember, these are people that had slaves. These are people who your mama and your aunt and your uncle were chattel slaves, were their property. These are the founding fathers of this country. So when we talk about this new dialogue on race, when we talk about what's happening right now, we need to understand since 1945 and up until this moment, the issue of white supremacy, white skin privilege, and race and politics in this country has always been a paradigm of disempowerment of people of color, criminalization of people of color. And this is going on since the days of slavery, since the booming days. So the police are the armed agents of a system that has enslaved us, dehumanized us, since the very moment that we were born into this country, So now you are adults, you're in college, you're matriculating. A lot of you have career ambitions and want to be something in this life. And I want to tell you that whatever you want to be personally is good. Your ambition is good. Your mama and your daddy probably didn't struggle and sacrifice so you could come to college for no reason, so that you wouldn't get an education. But what I'm trying to explain to you, brothers and sisters, that there's education and then there's education. You are in an elitist institution of education. And elitist institutions of education are not going to teach you how to liberate yourself or your people or empower you. They're going to try to individualize you and make you believe that you are exceptional, that you are not part of a whole, that you are not part of a people, that you are not part of humanity, that you are basically in it on your own. That you have to make a decision. Today, escaping from the ghetto is supposed to be some type of heroic move. The transformation of the ghetto into a position of power and empowerment where everybody can live in freedom and everybody can live with dignity should be the power move, not trying to get out. Because you're not going nowhere. In a white supremacist society, in a Eurocentric society, you'll only go as far as black people are permitted to go. So, we are almost out of first. Aren't we almost out of first now? The first Negro on the block, the first Negro to go to space, the first Negro. We almost out of first now, right? So all of y'all are down seconds and thirds. You can't be the first Negro in the space because already somebody has been there. You can't be the first Negro on the block because the guy down the block is probably the first Negro on the block. Okay? So you ain't going to be the first to anything. So you need to be the first in the struggle for freedom. Well, now there's a lot of firsts that need that. We need a lot of people to be first on that. We need a lot of folks and need you to understand that it's okay that if you choose a career. It's okay that if you want to be somebody and practice a particular profession. But what I'm begging you to understand is that you have to do that with an understanding that your job and your purpose on this planet is to contribute to humanity, not detract from it. It's to make a difference to humanity, not become someone who oppresses and exploits humanity for their existence, for their livelihood, to get paid. We told that people in law enforcement and policemen, that they took the job because they want to serve community. Aren't we told that? That they're taking a very dangerous job in order to protect us from the bad guys, right? Aren't we always told that? That basically the cops are here to protect and serve us, right? Well, ask yourself this. If a person who took a job and it was a volunteer, nobody twisted the arm of these people to become cops. But they took this job because they said they want to protect you from the bad guys. They want to protect the community from disruption and from people who would hurt other people. Which means they took an oath to put themselves between you and danger. To, in fact, take a bullet for you if necessary. But why is it whenever the police show up on the scene, their first statement is that their job is to protect each other? We have to secure the scene so our officers are not in danger. What did you take the job for? You were rolling up in danger when you took the job. How is your first instinct is to protect yourself and not the people that you came to help? So you wind up killing the people that you came to help to protect yourself. You shoot the man's dog when you come to his house to serve a warrant on him for a traffic violation. Shoot the man's dog because the dog is barking at you. What else do dogs do to strangers? Bark at him. Does the postman decide to pull out a pistol and shoot dogs so he can deliver the mail? The point is that you are dealing with a mentality of law enforcement. And this is my point. You are dealing with a mentality of law enforcement that's an extension of white supremacy and the power of the state. And has nothing to do with protecting your lives or protecting your property. It has everything to do with controlling you, intimidating you, and making you afraid to do anything. To protest, to demonstrate, to raise your voice in opposition to things that you feel that you have a right to raise your voice to. The Supreme Court has just passed legislation that says they no longer need a warrant to go into your house and search as long as officers believe there's probable cause for them to go into your house. In fact, they said if there's two people in the house and one wants the police to come in and the other one doesn't, then they have a right to go into the house, especially if they believe there's a criminal inside. So you don't have any rights. And what was the primary cause for George Washington and the so-called revolutionaries of the Revolutionary Movement? What was their primary motivation? That they were being occupied by British soldiers who had the right to come into their house and search them and arrest them without probable cause. And so what's in our Constitution? The right to your property to be safe in your home from illegal search and seizure. Huh? To have troops billeted in your community. The black community is occupied by a police force that does not live in our community. 87% of the cops in the black community come from outside our community. So the very principles that George Washington and all of his crew fought for to ensure their freedom is violated every day as you pursue your freedom. But nobody says that. Those voices are muted. You don't hear that. So freedom of speech in American democracy is an oxymoron. You can say whatever you want to say, but ain't nobody gonna hear it. Goes back to the old issue. Who hears a tree breaking, falling in the woods? Does it matter if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it? Huh? I had a sister on the Facebook who wrote some crazy stuff that she said that if a man says something or some sexist statement in the woods doesn't matter to women who don't hear it. And everybody chimed in and said, yes, it does. And I said, it depends on what he's saying. If he's peeing on a tree and says, that felt good, what would it matter to somebody that didn't hear? Okay? My point is, we could come up with all these glib statements about reality, but only you can define the reality in which you live. You cannot let other people who do not have your interest at heart define what you should be, define how you should think, and define how you should behave. You should be a rebel without a pause, this generation. Because the way things have moved into this country, the way the freedoms have been stripped away from ordinary people in this country, it's clear that the only way we're going to get back any semblance of democratic freedoms is that we have to build and create a new abolitionist movement. We have to abolish institutional white supremacy and racism, not reform it. Black people, Latino people, people of color, immigrant people, people who are at the bottom of the totem pole, homeless, poverty-stricken, mentally ill, have have no obligation to reform white supremacy. It's not your job to change our cracker thing. It's only your job to regulate his behavior. And the way you regulate a cracker's behavior is like Malcolm said, you have to speak the language they understand. And when a person treats you violently, when brutality is institutional, it's telling you that it's time for you to institutionalize your defense and your community. It's defense. That we have to talk about how are we going to survive as a people? How are we going to survive as a poor class when only the corporate rich are the ones that have an advantage in the law? How does our community survive? How does my grandmother survive if there's a natural catastrophe? How does my old uncle, you understand, who I love, how does he survive if all the lights went off tomorrow? If there was no water, you turned on the tap and no water came out, what are you going to do? Would this education at Merritt College help you survive? Will what you've learned in Black history help you survive? Will it? What are you going to do if there's no water? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to eat? You going to go rob Walmart? After 3 or 4 hits on Walmart is empty. What are you going to do? You going to go rob your neighbor? Take their food? What will you do? You see? It's a hell of a thought, right? What am I going to do? You going to get on Twitter? Ain't no Twitter. Electricity went off. What happens when your phone battery went out? No more Twitter. Right? You have no more Twitter. So what are you going to do? And this is where consciousness comes in. You have to build communities for your survival. You have to learn to be your own first responder. You have to learn to create networks that will take care of the poor and the infirm in our community. You have to go into the churches where you are at and into the mosques where you are at and ask your pastor, what are we going to do about the elderly in this congregation in case there's a flood or in case there's an emergency? Shouldn't we be stocking water? Shouldn't we have the types of stuff that we can have in order to, communicate with our families and get them to a safe place? Shouldn't we have a shelter in the church basement for this purpose? Shouldn't we have some type of survival training to the families? Instead of him standing up talking about Jacob, Joseph, and Jesus and how they did what, 2,000 years ago. You have to need to ask your pastor, I'm feeling Jesus, and I love Jesus, and, I want to be a good example, but Jesus ain't going to turn the water back on for me if it go off. Jesus is not going to feed my family if I can't get no food. Jesus is not going to get a grand jury to indict somebody to kill my son. Jesus ain't going to do it. Because Jesus ain't here. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to take that responsibility. You're going to have to hold that pastor responsible and say, man, you ain't talking about nothing. If you ain't talking about this congregation becoming a better congregation, taking care of ourselves, rather than buying you a new Cadillac or a new BMW every year, if you're not talking about that, I'm out of here. I'm going to another church. I'm going to a church of what's happening now. The church of what up? The church of get busy now. That's the church I'm going to. The pastor over here is called Pastor Get Busy. That's where I'm going. I'm not going over here to hear about the sweet by and by and all of these things. It's the same thing with imams. It's the same thing with the Muslim community. The Muslim community, historically, the mosque was a place of community where families came together, where the community came together to resolve their issues, to talk about their own survival. This is what the mosque was supposed to be. They weren't just a place to go in and pray and leave. They were part of the community. Well, we know what happens with that because in those parts of the world where Muslims still get together in the masjids to determine what they're going to do in their community. The United States now sends over drones to bomb these places, claiming they're after Al-Qaeda terrorists, and they just killed ISIL terrorists. And all of the 40 people that they killed in the mosque, they killed this terrorist leader, and everybody else was obviously jihadis. They killed people with immunity based on their own interests. You're next. Your life doesn't matter. And when you take a sign, you throw up a sign and say Black Lives Matter, the police will get up a sign and say all lives matter. And then you being a humanist and say, well, that's true. But I was talking about black folks. Yeah, well, you got to talk about everybody. But you don't say that when you have a campaign against breast cancer. You don't say, we campaign to bring awareness to breast cancer. I'm supposed to go out and pick a sign and say all cancers matter? All disease matter. You know, why are you picking on breast cancer? We are all cancers matter. You don't do that. You support the breast cancer campaign because you know that that particular cancer needs support, etc. If these crackers, if these white folks in this country were sincere about your humanity, they would be in the streets with you when Gardner was killed. They would be in the streets with you when Brown was killed. But they only took to the streets when 2 cops get killed. 20,000 policemen go to a funeral in New York in uniform with police cars on taxpayers' money. That's your money they went to the funeral. And you don't have to, how do y'all spend all this money to go to a funeral? Ain't none of y'all spend any money to investigate the Brown case or go to his funeral. Nobody cared. Only you cared. So my point in all of this is, black studies don't matter. What matters is your understanding of how you got here and what your purpose is going to be when you leave. That's what matters. How did you get here? Who brought you to the party? Who brought you to the dance? You got to dance with who brought you to the party. Your parents brought you here. Your parents put you in this situation. Your parents struggled so that you could go to college. Your parents stayed on your butt when you didn't want to do your homework so that you would get a better education. It was your parents that did it. How did they get here? Why did they do it? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. Why did they do it? What were they thinking? So that when you take to the streets and you go out to the streets and your mama or your daddy say, where you going, boy? I'm going out here to get with the Black Lives Matter demonstration. Why are you going out there? You need to be doing your homework. You don't need to be out the street with all these people. That's stupid. Say, Daddy, you brought me to the party. It's because of you I'm here. It's because of you I'm doing this. I wouldn't have to do this if it wasn't for you. So what are you telling me? Don't follow up on what you did. You wanted me to be somebody. Well, I'm supposed to be nobody? This is the struggle that you're going to confront for the next 6 months with your elder generation, who realizes that the situation we are living in today, they're responsible for it. They let it happen. They let it happen. Mass incarceration didn't happen while Jesse Jackson wasn't running for president. It happened when he was doing it. Huh? The police didn't decide the war on drugs meant that they had to deploy SWAT teams in our community. It's still Negroes up on Capitol Hill who asked for it. So we are in a situation where we have to contend with vicious, racist police occupying our community, intimidating us on a daily basis, and we're to be told that they only need better training, that we need to have better understanding. And in fact, black on black crime is the real issue. Black on black crime. We killing each other and murdering each other. Proximity crime is the big issue. Well, white folks waged 2 wars. Killed tens of millions of people. Nobody called that white on white crime. Okay? Nobody denoted the racial composition of white Europeans who were fighting each other for colonial possessions, for power, and for global territory. Huh? But we're told whenever we raise the issue of institutional violence, that why we need to talk about black on black crime first before we talk about anything else. The majority of murders that's committed in America are committed by people who live in close proximity to each other or even know each other. So it's not unusual that black folks who are crammed into urban colonies shoot and kill each other. Who are they going to go? They will go out of the community to go downtown to shoot white folks that they don't even know. It ain't happening. We kill and shoot each other because we live in close proximity to each other. And because we have been in an environment that has created a certain type of self-hatred and self-contempt that we feed on it and we hurt and harm each other. So it's very important to understand how you got here, the conditions that brought you here, and then you can start to think about, how do I move this forward? How do I make this place better? How do I contribute doing something that I feel good about in my life, and at the same time contribute to the lives of other people? Human beings have to be interactive, interdependent. We are social people, all of us. And so we have to take responsibility for everything that we do personally. Nobody has to tell you you're responsible for A, B, and C. You have to tell yourself, I'm taking responsibility for this. When I joined the Black Panther Party, I didn't join the Black Panther Party because I wanted to feed children. I didn't even know there wasn't no breakfast program when I joined the party. It came afterwards. I didn't join the Black Panther Party because I wanted to establish a free health clinic. I didn't join the Black Panther Party because I wanted to escort old ladies across the street with a black beret on and a black jacket. I joined the Black Panther Party for one thing and one thing only, to check the police who had bullied me all my life. Don't you think that you just couldn't breathe now? I couldn't breathe when I was your age. I've been in police stations since I was 11 years old, getting my ass whipped by police. So when I became of age, I decided they was not going to whip my ass. In fact, I was going to whip on their ass. I was going to make them rue the day that I was ever born. And I kind of like achieved that a little bit. They don't like me, I don't like them. It's cool. But what I'm saying to you is, make decisions based on your history. Make decisions based on the sacrifices that your family put in so that you could be here. Make decisions based on your love for yourself. Love of self. Your own dignity. Your own dignity. The reason why you want to check the police, I had wanted to check the police, is so that we could have some dignity in our community. That they wouldn't come into my community and beat people in front of their mom and beat us down and drag us off because they felt like it, because they were police. You come in our community after dark, you got a problem. Because I live there and I know the neighborhood. And if you think urban guerrilla warfare is a joke, ask Popo. Was it a joke with the Black Liberation Army? Ask them. They didn't walk around in the black community like tough guys in 1971. Believe that. They used to stand with their back to the wall, 3 and 4 deep with their back to the wall till their duty tour was up, and they'd jump on the van and go on in. They wasn't walking around biting people until you get off the corner and all of this stuff. Let me see what you got in your pockets. Hey, you, come over here. Give me some ID. What are you doing here? They didn't do that. They did not do that. They stopped doing that. They only started doing that when you came along. You see? So, she's waving her hands, and I just want to say that I never intended to give the speech that I gave. But I gave the speech that I gave because I feel one thing. That right here with Huey Newton's poster up here, it would be inappropriate for me to talk about anything else than our right to our humanity and our right to self-defense. Because at one time, he was my leader. I joined the Black Panther Party, and Huey P. Newton had a lot going for him, despite his defects. He had me going for him. And the most important thing to understand is that Huey P. Newton came from a ghetto, came from a community just like you, went to this college just like you did. But he stepped inside of history and changed it. And that's how it happens with everybody. A bully today will become a revolutionary warrior tomorrow. An intellectual today will become a philosopher on the level of a Du Bois or on the level of a John Henry Clark tomorrow. Some of you sitting here will be law professors. Some of you sitting here will be leaders in your various walks of life that you've chosen. But I'm saying whatever you choose, don't walk the walk of a punk. Don't walk the walk of somebody that just takes what they give you and then go along with the program. Walk the walk of someone who understands what your parents went through to get you here. And what you have to do in order to vindicate your right to be here. Not this building, but on this planet. Not Oakland, but on this planet. We need people to step forward and fight for the rights of humanity, for the weak, for the poor. We need smart people to come forward and devise ways to empower the poor, to change our lives, to change the lives of our generations and our children. If we don't do that, we will not survive America. So that's my message to you. In the whirlwind, you are a citizen. In struggle, you are somebody. Outside of struggle, you're just an individual. So struggle for something that's worthwhile. And I think that if one person comes out of here that does that, then me standing up here talking to you was worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you. morning, everybody. My name is Jamar Mears. I'm a counselor here at the College of Alameda. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. I'm sorry that I know yesterday being a holiday, we didn't have the biggest turnout as we wanted, but what matters is that you are here, so we thank you for that. An important person, historical person, once asked a question, what are you doing for others? And so that's what we're here for today, to memorialize and honor those who came before us, the soldiers, the shoulders that we stand on, and those who fought for equality. Black Lives Matter. Everything that's going on in the world today with Trayvon Martin and Oscar Grants and the Michael Browns. And so we have we're going to just do a short little ceremony where we can have a moment of silence. You guys will be able to come forward, write a name on the wall of a fallen soldier or loved one, and we have Mr. Washington here will lead a little ceremony on libations. And we have Uncle Kerry here. He's going to speak briefly. And we conclude with a march around just right here in the courtyard area. And we conclude right here. I'll turn it over to Kerry.
My name is Kerry Downs from Stockton, California. And like you said, what are we doing to make a difference? And what I do is I go around sharing my story about my son who was killed in 2010 by Stockton Police and the county sheriff. On July 22nd, 2010, my son, James L. Rivera Jr., who was unarmed, 16 years old, was shot and killed by two different agencies, Stockton Police and County Sheriff. They used what they called a pit maneuver to push my son through two metal mailboxes and finally through a garage where the car was, I call it, at a standstill, and the officers got out and started opening fire on my son. They used an AR-15 on my son, military weapons. And this is the kind of weapons that they are using in our community to kill our kids and anybody else that come in contact with the police. Our son didn't do nothing that day. Before that day, he didn't commit any crime. We still, to this day, it's been 5 years we've been fighting against the police that shot our son. We haven't got no police report, no dash cam video. We just got some personal property he had on him. We don't have all his clothes and stuff like that he had on. And it's quite naturally why they want to give us that, because there was so many bullet holes in our son that I wouldn't want anybody to go through that. So in part, it's what I do is I go around sharing my son's story in hopes that it will wake people up and don't say, look, it hasn't happened to me, it's not my kid, it's not my problem. Well, it is your problem, because we don't want your kid to end up like our kid was shot. We don't want your friend's kid to end up like our son was shot. Still to this day, like I said, we don't know why they shot our son. Now there's a report that they was looking for somebody else, and he supposedly the car fit the description, but he was never a suspect in any robberies or any brutal robberies or shootings, anything like that. So anyway, basically what I'm saying is that my son, he paid a price dearly, and it kind of like put us in the movement, so to speak, because we had no idea that we were going to be doing what we do, going around sharing our son's story. We go in neighborhoods where people can't go. What we do is we blew up our son's pictures, his morgue pictures, because we want the young people to see. Because usually when you go to a crime scene where there's been multiple shootings by officers, they have you blocked off and taped up where you can't really see nothing, so you don't know what's going on. And so they stick a story out there to the media or to the society, and they get this opinion that, okay, what did he do wrong? He must have done something wrong. You don't have to do nothing wrong when the police is called out. You don't have to do nothing wrong. They could come to your house because of a disturbance and come here and shoot and kill somebody. It has happened several times already. So basically, to make a long story short, we've been, my wife been to Ferguson. She's not here this time. Dion is the mother of our son. She's been to Ferguson. She stood with the community. She stood with a lot of issues that's going on out there, with some of the families out there. We've flown all over the state of California, to New York, LA, Chicago, Atlanta. We just got back from Atlanta, and we stand and we still tell our story because we want people to understand that this is not just a black and brown thing. This is a whole people thing. And our thing is that, look, people can sit here and tape and videotape and all that, but it's how we get change is that people get involved. Get in the streets, stand, and let your voices be heard, because sitting back saying it's not my problem or sitting back at a desk is not going to do it. It's just not going to do it. We have to come together as a people. It don't matter what kind of group you're from. All these groups need to put those differences aside and come together. It's really important right now. It has gotten out of hand. So many kids are being killed in the street like never before. They're being placed in prisons, in solitary confinement, where they're being fed all these drugs and all type of things that's going on in prison. But we can close that door. And the only way we'll close that door is that we be involved, get involved. If you can't actually be on the front line, be on social media, share the information, share some of these stories about some of these family members who's lost their kids in the street, who continue to fight and ain't got no justice at all. What's missing is the people. Numbers. We need numbers. People in numbers, people to voice their opinions and say, hey, this is something, we have a problem. We're not taking it no more. This has got to stop. So in part, that's where we're at right now. Like I said, we went to Atlanta to a 2015 national conference where we had people all over the country. So I'm here telling you about April 14th. It's a shutdown, major shutdown, national shutdown. And we, like I say, we were all, it's people from all over the country, and we got this information. Everybody has it, so it's not just us doing it out here. It's people all over the country doing it right now. So I just want you guys to know that you're not in this movement by yourself. There's a whole bunch of people doing the same thing we're doing right now today. Getting this message out and telling people, hey, enough is enough. Only way we're going to get them to listen to us is that we shut it down. Business, no business as usual, no school, no work, no nothing on April the 14th. So that's all I have to say. I hope I didn't take up too much time. Thank you for having me.
Once again, I'd like to say thank you for coming out. Thank you, Uncle Gary.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'd like to thank the Black History Month Planning Committee. I'd like to thank the student group of Stop Mass Incarceration, Brotherhood, and Open Gate. I'd like to thank all you guys for coming out, faculty and staff, and other students, and those I see out there.
We're going to come back to you with 2 more songs. The first one has, again, another beautiful message. It just simply says, I need you to survive. We all may have differences, but we're all also human, so we're the same in that. That's a universal. Check. Okay, there we go. So what I was saying is, is that this song just simply says, I need you to survive. It's real simple. It's all. Check. Okay. I need you to survive. Here we go.
I need you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive.
Okay, that was a beautiful song, beautiful message, right? I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. So hopefully somebody will take that and run with it.